Opening the center immediately aims to develop pieces rapidly and claim early central space, often leading to a dynamic middle game. Developing the knight to its most natural square immediately challenges white's central ambitions and prepares for rapid kingside castling. Opening central space aggressively, white signals intent for a dynamic attacking game. Solidifying the center and preparing for rapid development, this stance welcomes a more positional battle. Developing the knight to c3 now supports the central pawn push and prepares for queenside castling, creating harmonious piece play. Pinning the knight creates immediate central tension, forcing white to carefully consider their knight's future and pawn structure. Securing the center and preparing kingside castling while maintaining flexible pawn structure. Securing the monarch amidst this developing tension is a prudent priority. Pinning the knight now makes black's pawn structure a potential weakness if they commit to d5. Solidifying the pawn structure, this move liberates the c8 bishop and prepares for queenside development, a sound strategic choice. Solidifying the center and preparing for queenside expansion, while subtly inviting a pawn structure decision. Preparing to challenge central tension, the queen now eyes the pawn on e3 and supports potential piece activity. Recentering the bishop frees up the queen and prepares a more flexible kingside structure. Unleashing a central pawn advance to challenge white's queenside development, creating immediate positional friction. Preparing to contest the center and potentially unleash a queenside attack, while also safeguarding the king. This redeployment brings the rook into the game, preparing to contest the e-file and potentially reinforce the kingside pawn structure. Bringing the king to safety solidifies the pawn structure, preparing for potential pawn breaks or piece activity in the center. Exchanging on c3 fundamentally alters the pawn structure, potentially weakening white's queenside. Opening the b-file and doubling pawns creates a solid pawn center, but potentially weakens the queenside structure for future play. Challenging white's aggressive pawn structure now, but potentially weakening the kingside light squares. Re-establishing diagonal pressure forces black to consider pawn structure concessions around their king. Challenging the center's pawn structure, black aims to seize initiative and disrupt white's central grip. Deploying the rook to its central file injects pressure and prepares for eventual pawn breaks, aiming to seize initiative. Developing the bishop to g4 creates immediate pressure on white's center and prepares for potential piece exchanges that could open lines. Trading that bishop clears the c-file, opening lines that might just become decisive in the middle game. The queen's relocation reclaims material and clarifies the pawn structure, though it may draw early attention. Sharpens the queenside pawn structure, while centralizing the queen for active participation. Exchanging the bishop for the knight significantly alters the pawn structure, potentially opening lines for white's queen but creating doubled pawns. Exchanging the bishop liberates the queen to prowl the open files. Developing the knight to c6 aims to solidify the center and prepare for potential pawn advances, while also untangling the pieces. Unlocking the c-file, white aims to exploit black's doubled pawns and centralize the queen for maximum pressure. Reclaiming the center with this pawn capture not only solidifies black's central pawn structure, but also opens a diagonal for the queen. Asserting dominance on the d-file now, preparing for potential pawn advances or battery formations. Securing the d-file with the rook now prepares to challenge white's central pawns and potentially initiate queenside counterplay. Unlocking the d-file's potential, this piece aggressively contests control and seeks to penetrate black's weakened queenside. Securing the b6 pawn stabilizes the queenside pawn structure and prepares for potential queenside expansion, although it slightly weakens the pawn chain. Asserting dominance on the central open files, this rook now eyes further central penetration and potential pressure on black's isolated queenside pawns. Seeking activity and a clearer path for the knight, this maneuver aims to avoid the central pawn structure and prepare for potential breakthroughs on the queenside. Securing the king's safety by reinforcing its pawn shield, h3 offers immediate protection against potential knight incursions and allows for freer piece maneuvering. Sacrificing the exchange here to open lines for your rooks feels like a desperate attempt to gain activity against white's solid pawn structure. Liberating the d-file for your rook initiates a potent pressure on black's pawns. Reclaiming the queen after the pawn capture reasserts piece presence, preparing to contest the d-file and potentially launch a counterattack. Re-establishing the bishop's outpost on g4 allows for potential central pawn pressure and a more active piece presence, though it risks overextension. Suddenly, black's queen pivots to attack the b-pawn, threatening a queenside counterplay against white's slightly exposed king. Reinforcing the bishop's influence on the dark squares, this repositioning aims to pressure black's weakened queenside pawn structure. Reassessing the queenside structure, this retreat aims to consolidate the piece and prepare for potential pawn advances. Seizing the open file now promises white significant central control and potential pressure on black's weakened pawn structure. Sacrificing the exchange to activate the rook and challenge white's queenside initiative presents a dynamic counterplay. A daring queen sacrifice to seize the initiative, disrupting black's position and opening critical lines. Unleashing a tactical storm, this piece captures the pawn, seeking to disrupt white's queenside structure and initiate immediate counterplay. Liberating the queen initiates an endgame where white's passed pawn offers potent winning chances. Retrieving the pawn, black solidifies their central presence and prepares to consolidate their material advantage. This maneuver repositions the bishop to a more active diagonal, preparing for potential queenside pressure and better king safety. Unleashing a knight's bold incursion into white's queenside weakness. Liberating the bishop from its defensive post, this move aims to exploit the now open central files for rapid piece activation and potential mating threats. Activating the rook with purpose, preparing for a counterthrust into white's weakened queenside. Solidifying the center is paramount now, aiming to leverage this e4 pawn's influence for future kingside action. Expanding the queenside pawn structure provides critical counterplay and potential outposts for the knight. Solidifying central space and preparing a queenside pawn push, this advance aims to restrict black's mobility. Unlocking the queenside pawn chain by advancing the b-pawn creates immediate pressure and potential entry points. Opening the c-file offers immediate pressure and potential breakthroughs along the queenside. Reclaiming the pawn with the knight initiates a counterattack on white's exposed queenside pawn structure. Unlocking the central squares allows the pawns to advance and create dynamic threats. Creating a bridgehead on the queenside with this pawn push begins a daring attempt to disrupt white's central control and secure new territory. Asserting central control with the pawn aims to restrict black's pieces and prepare an attack on the kingside. Reclaiming central influence is the immediate objective, aiming to disrupt white's pawn chain and create attacking chances. Bringing the king into the game now secures it on a safer square and prepares it for potential central action. Unleashing the pawn storm at the kingside, black aims to disrupt white's pawn structure and gain attacking momentum. A bold push to gain queenside space, but it weakens the king's shield. Unleashing the pawn chain creates immediate attacking chances on the kingside. Opening the g-file aggressively forces black to defend their pawn structure, while the white king prepares for the coming storm. Seeking to activate the knight and challenge white's central pawn advances, this knight repositions to a more active square. The king embarks on a perilous central journey, exposing itself to potential dangers amidst the open lines. Pushing this pawn opens up the queenside, creating space and potential past pawn ambitions, but also weakens the pawn structure significantly. Unleashing the pawn chain's latent power, this thrust aims to disrupt black's central control and potentially open new avenues for the king. Reclaiming the central outpost for the knight offers a critical rebalancing of pieces and opens avenues for counterplay. Unleashing the rook on the 7th demands vigilance, as it aims to restrict Black's advancing pawns and exploit their potential weaknesses. A desperate attempt to disrupt White's king's safety, but the knight leaves its crucial defensive post too late. Unleashing the passed pawn promises a fierce race to promotion, forcing Black into a defensive scramble. This pawn sacrifice cracks open the king's defenses, creating an immediate tactical storm. Unleashing the passed pawn's power after the king's forced retreat creates immediate pressure on the queen's side.